Listen, I know that sounds dramatic, but I'm still reeling from what happened. I'm Quinn Mitchell, 34, a senior architect, and about a week ago, I woke up from a 3-day medically induced haze to discover my entire life had been dismantled by the people who supposedly loved me. The sheer audacity of it still makes my blood run cold. It all started with the venue. My fiancé, Liam, and I weren't just planning a wedding, we were planning a future. We'd found this breathtaking old estate, the Terracotta Gardens, a perfect mix of vintage architecture and endless wild greenery, and we had signed a unique contract. A massive, non-refundable deposit, $90,000, not just to rent the space for our vows, but to lock in a purchase option on the parcel of land for our future custom home. That $90K was every penny Liam and I had saved, plus a personal loan I'd secured to cover the rest of the associated custom contracts. We were calling the event the Vow and Vision Launch. It was everything to us. The food poisoning hit me like a train 2 weeks before the event. It was severe enough that I ended up in the ICU. The first thing I heard when my eyes fluttered open was the dull, rhythmic beep of a hospital monitor and the sickly sweet scent of my sister, Bryn's, expensive perfume. Bryn, 27, the aesthetic living influencer, was standing there with our mother, Joyce, the high-powered real estate broker who believes life is just a series of high-stakes closings. They looked smug. "She's awake," Bryn chirped, adjusting the silk ribbon on her freshly styled hair. My mouth was bone dry. "Liam? The vow and vision?" I managed to rasp out. Mom leaned in, her voice unnaturally smooth. "Oh, darling, that's been handled. We canceled it. You were in no state to proceed. And frankly, Liam wasn't up to the family standard. But don't worry, we secured the deposits." Alarm bells were screaming in my ears, but my head felt like it was stuffed with cotton wool. Bryn stepped forward, practically vibrating with excitement. "Quinn, you are going to be so proud of me. The venue, your florist, your custom caterer, even those amazing renderings you did for the home design, they're all being used for my sterling partnership launch instead." My heart rate monitor went from a steady drum to a frantic siren. A nurse rushed in, shooing them back, telling me to calm down. Mom waved her off with that imperious hand gesture she uses with waiters and subordinates. "Family business, nurse. She needs to know the truth." As they were reluctantly escorted out, the full weight of the betrayal hit me. They didn't just cancel the wedding, they committed grand larceny on my future. I flashed back to the loan documents, the vendor contracts, the specialized architectural models I had created for the custom event layout, all non-refundable, all tied to my loan. $120,000 lost. And Liam? What did they tell Liam? My phone was gone, of course. "We needed to control the narrative," Joyce explained later when I was discharged, looking utterly unfazed. She handed me my phone back as if it were a misplaced accessory. It immediately exploded with notifications, including a text from Liam. "I honestly wish you could have just told me you were having doubts yourself, Quinn. After 4 years, I deserved more than a call from your mother." My stomach felt like I'd swallowed razor blades. They told him I backed out. My family, the retired federal prosecutor dad, the real estate broker mom, and the aspirational sister, had executed a flawless identity theft operation while I was unconscious. I limped into my apartment, barely able to stand, and collapsed on the couch. My laptop was the first battlefield. I logged into my professional email and saw the dozens of messages they'd sent. "To Terracotta Gardens. Please transfer all contract details, deposits, and reservations for the Vow and Vision event to my sister, Bryn Mitchell, for her upcoming Sterling Partnership launch. Family is delighted with the change." The Sterling name. Bryn was engaged to Hayes Carter, heir to the massive Sterling development firm. This wasn't just about a wedding. It was about leveraging my life's work and my savings for their social and business climb. An hour later, they arrived at my door. The Mitchell Trinity of betrayal. They stood there, looking solemn and concerned, the professional masks firmly in place. Bryn held out her hand, twisting the new, blindingly large engagement ring from Hayes Carter. On her right index finger, though, was my original ring, the simple, vintage cut Liam had spent 6 months saving for. "Keeping it safe for you, sis," she said, her voice dripping with fake concern. "It's been chaos." Dad, Victor, cleared his throat, taking the lead. "Quinn, we need to discuss the practical necessities. You were sick. The deposits would have been forfeit entirely. Bryn marrying into the Sterling family, that connection benefits all of us. It elevates the Mitchell name."
Practical necessities. "How did you get into my email? My bank accounts?" I asked, my voice thin but rising. Joyce didn't flinch. "We used your emergency information at the hospital. Doctors needed someone to make decisions, and we are your next of kin." Bryn smiled, cold and sharp. "I just casually mentioned to Liam that I'd seen some old text messages. Maybe you were second-guessing things. That sometimes people aim too low when they're young." Aim too low. That cut deep. They didn't even see my happiness as real, just an inconvenient obstacle to Bryn's grand descent. Then came the final twist of the knife. "And about your architecture contracts," Dad added, brightly, as if delivering good news. "Bryn helped smooth things over. She called your clients and explained you were having a severe mental health crisis and couldn't meet deadlines." My freelance business, built on trust and years of working 80-hour weeks, destroyed by a few concerned phone calls. I checked my bank account balance. The $120,000 debt was still mine. The loan still needed paying, but the assets were gone, repurposed for Bryn's moment. "Do you understand that this is fraud?" I asked, staring at the 3 faces that looked eerily similar to my own. "Legal action will destroy the family and embarrass everyone," Dad immediately countered, his retired prosecutor tone hardening. "Is that what you want, Quinn, after all we've done for you?" As Mom reached out to pat my arm, her touch repulsive, my phone buzzed. It was Dustin, my videographer, the guy I'd hired for the Vow and Vision event. I answered, stepping away. "Quinn?" "Man, I am completely confused. The venue staff mentioned this was originally a wedding, your wedding, but your mom told me you were just rebranding for your sister's party. What the hell is going on?" His genuine confusion was the first honest human interaction I'd had since waking up. I explained, briefly, hanging up with a knot of nausea in my stomach. When I looked back, my family was still waiting, their expressions unchanged. They expected me to fall in line, to forgive, to sacrifice myself for the collective Mitchell name. But as I looked at Bryn's glowing face, already planning her influencer posts from the venue I'd paid for, something broke inside me, replaced by a cold, sharp determination. They took my wedding, my home, my savings, and my fiancé. I realized right then that I didn't want forgiveness, I wanted accountability. And I was going to deliver it, not with anger, but with the ruthless, meticulous precision of a woman whose job it is to build things from the ground up, and who now knew exactly where to plant the wrecking ball. The first step was documentation. I spent the next 72 hours compiling everything. The loan papers, the venue contract with my signature, screenshots of the fraudulent emails. I titled the folder, Operation Blueprint Reclamation. I needed allies. I started with Dustin. He was troubled, he told me. He had a conscience. The next call was to Liam. I had to risk everything to tell him the truth before they poisoned him completely. But before I could call Liam, I got a notification that stopped me cold. Bryn had just posted a new architectural rendering on her Instagram, proudly showcasing the vision for the Sterling launch. It was my custom design, stolen, rebranded, and captioned with 1,000 celebratory emojis. That confirmed it. This wasn't just theft. This was professional sabotage. I looked at the $120,000 debt burning a hole in my name, and I looked at my sister, whose happiness was built on my literal ruin. The realization was stark. I needed more than just a lawyer. I needed leverage, and I needed to use the one thing my family valued above all else, their reputation, to make them pay.
When I hung up with Dustin, the videographer, I knew I had found my first ally, a crack in the Mitchell-Sterling fortress. He was genuinely disgusted by the switch, not just professionally, but morally. He confirmed what I suspected. Mom and Bryn had been extremely vague, claiming I was having a quiet, nervous breakdown and wanted Bryn to take over the event as a grand gesture of family support. That night, the anxiety was so crippling I couldn't sleep, but I didn't waste the hours. I systematically backed up every single email, text, and financial document. The sheer volume of evidence was staggering. It wasn't just my wedding they stole, it was my professional identity. A crucial breakthrough came via my primary client management system. While I was hospitalized, they hadn't just told my clients I was having a breakdown, they had accessed my shared drives and subtly delayed deadlines, creating a paper trail that painted me as unreliable. This was beyond greedy, it was malicious. I realized they wanted to ensure I would never financially recover enough to challenge them. The next morning, I did the hardest thing. I called Liam. He answered on the third ring, his voice guarded and distant. I didn't waste time on pleasantries. Liam, everything my mother and sister told you is a lie. I was not having second thoughts. I was in the ICU with severe food poisoning, and they seized the opportunity. They stole the entire event, told the vendors I was backing out, and told you I didn't want to marry you. There was a long silence, the kind where you can almost hear the other person's brain reconstructing reality. Quinn, they showed me old photos. They said you had reached out to a lawyer about canceling the land deposit because you felt aiming for a small academic life with me was beneath your career trajectory now that you're a senior architect. The venom of their lies was unbelievable. They knew exactly which buttons to push with a thoughtful guy like Liam, who already worried about his small academic life compared to my high-earning career. Liam, I insisted, check your spam folder. I tried contacting you from the hospital using a friend's phone, but they intercepted it and blocked the number. They forged an email to your university account. I have the copies now. Please check the dates against my hospitalization records. He promised he would, his tone shifting from suspicion to deep unease. Later that day, the notifications started pouring in, not from my family, but from the vendors. First, my custom furniture designer who was making the centerpiece tables. Quinn, I am uncomfortable with this event. Joyce insisted we re-invoice everything in Bryn Sterling's name using the original non-refundable deposit you paid. I felt sick doing it, but I needed the contract. Then, my custom floral artist sent a full confession detailing how Bryn had rejected my carefully chosen, sustainable flower plan as too rustic and had demanded exotic, out-of-season orchids, using my deposit to cover the cost difference. They all felt misled, manipulated, and professionally compromised. I directed them all to a single civil litigation attorney, specializing in contract fraud. The attorney, a sharp woman named Sarah, messaged me back. Quinn, this is not just civil, this is almost criminal. The documentation is impeccable. You have a case for fraud, identity theft, conversion of assets, and professional defamation. The scales of power had tilted entirely. I no longer felt like a victim. I felt like a general with an army of betrayed vendors and an ironclad evidence trail. But the final piece of leverage needed to be deployed against the Sterlings. My family wouldn't fear losing money. They feared losing status. My chance came unexpectedly. Bryn's fiancé, Carter Sterling, the heir, sent me a formal email. Quinn, my parents, the senior Sterlings, are requesting an in-person meeting tomorrow evening to discuss the rumors surrounding the Terracotta Gardens event. They believe resolution is preferable to scandal. Please bring your parents. I accepted immediately. This was the moment of deployment. The Sterling family was old money. They valued discretion and reputation above all else. They wouldn't want a civil suit that dragged their heir's fiancé, and by extension, the Sterling name, through a public fraud case. I arrived at the Sterling mansion the next evening wearing a simple, sharp, black architect's sheath dress. It was armor. The Sterling living room was vast, dominated by tasteful, muted art and a sense of suffocating, quiet wealth. Mr. Sterling, the patriarch, was stiff and imposing. His wife, the matriarch, looked like she perpetually smelled something bad. I sat across from them, my leather portfolio on my lap. My family arrived 15 minutes late, a chaotic whirlwind of high-end fabrics and forced smiles. Mom was practically glowing with the assumed proximity to sterling wealth. Dad immediately launched into the rehearsed defense, unfolding a piece of paper. We have prepared a statement. There has been an unfortunate family misunderstanding, a case of family helping family during a medical crisis. Bryn offered a saccharine, tearful apology. I'm so sorry Quinn feels hurt, but everything worked out for the best. James and I needed a proper launch, and you were too sick to use what you'd arranged. Family loyalty means keeping private matters private, Dad interjected, shooting me a warning look. He ended with the ultimate threat. If you pursue legal action, Quinn, you will be cut off, completely. No holidays, no contact, you'll be alone. The threat should have paralyzed me, as it always had, but now it just felt pathetic. I opened my portfolio. I'd like to share some facts with the Sterlings. The room went silent. I reached into my bag and pulled out a small, high-quality Bluetooth speaker. I placed it on the pristine glass coffee table and pressed play. Dustin's accidental recording, the one he had forgotten to turn off during the venue setup, filled the dead air. Mom's voice, crystal clear. Bryn elevates the family name. Quinn, well, she always aimed small. Her custom home design was sweet, but frankly embarrassing compared to what we need for the Sterling launch. This was for the best. My aunt's voice, the one who hates Liam. Liam's an art history professor. That was never going to work. He was dragging Quinn down. Mom's face went white. Bryn gasped, covering her mouth dramatically. I stopped the recording and then calmly began spreading the printed evidence. The notarized venue contract with my name, the $120,000 loan documents, still solely my liability. The correspondence where Joyce impersonated me and the architectural renderings that Bryn had stolen and posted as her vision. This is not family helping family, I stated, looking Mr. Sterling directly in the eye. This is identity theft, conversion of assets, and professional fraud committed while I was unconscious. I did not aim small. I aimed for a life with integrity, and they stole it. Mr. Sterling, a man who built his empire on contracts, leaned back, his jaw tight. This is unacceptable. This is not a misunderstanding. This is criminal. He then turned to his son, Hayes, who had been watching in stunned silence. Hayes, I believe you need to reconsider this engagement. Character reveals itself in crisis. Bryn let out a choked sound, her tears now very real. As Dad finally slumped forward, defeated, accepting the inevitable, Mr. Sterling's lawyer, who was silently observing in the corner, slid a drafted agreement across the table. Full financial restitution, compensation for emotional damages, public apology to clear my name with my vendors and former fiancé. My family was trapped. They could pay or face a public scandal that would permanently damage the Sterling Association, and more importantly to them, the Mitchell name. Dad picked up the pen, his hand trembling. The debt was settled, the restitution guaranteed. But as he signed, I felt no triumph, just a cold, hard finality. They had sacrificed my future for their social climbing, and now they had to pay for the damage. The real revenge, however, wasn't financial. It was the fact that I had just weaponized the one thing they cherished above all else, their reputation. And now I had to make sure the restitution didn't end up funding Bryn's next scheme. I knew the public apology wouldn't be enough. I needed to ensure this betrayal became a permanent, visible anchor around their reputable necks. The next step was leveraging the evidence for something much, much bigger. The moment Dad's trembling signature scrawled across the restitution agreement, Mr. Sterling looked at me, a flicker of genuine respect in his eyes. He wasn't apologizing for his son's bad taste in fiancés, but he was acknowledging the cold, hard efficiency of my revenge. The agreement was clear. $120,000 returned within 30 days, plus $25,000 for emotional damages, and a legally binding clause requiring a full written apology distributed to all vendors and former mutual contacts, specifically stating that I was the victim of fraud while hospitalized. This wasn't just money, this was the forced dismantling of the narrative they had spent weeks constructing. As we left the Sterling mansion, the silence between the four of us was heavier than any argument could have been. Bryn, mascara running down her perfect face, shot me a look that promised eternal hatred. Mom and Dad wouldn't meet my eyes. They hadn't lost a daughter, they had lost a social opportunity, and they blamed me for its collapse. The next day, the public dismantling began. The Sterling family issued a terse statement announcing the immediate dissolution of the engagement between Hayes Carter and Bryn Mitchell, citing irreconcilable differences pertaining to integrity and trust. The social media world of the affluent Bay Area exploded. Bryn's carefully curated Instagram, full of posts teasing her Sterling partnership launch, suddenly went silent. The last few posts, featuring the renderings of my custom home design, accumulated hundreds of comments questioning the abrupt cancellation and the vague integrity clause. I immediately called Liam. We met for coffee, and this time there were no defenses, only apologies and raw truth. He had found the intercepted email and the forged documents. "I am so sorry, Quinn," he said, holding my hands across the table. "They played me perfectly. They knew I was insecure about not giving you that high-end architect life." We both knew, however, that the relationship couldn't be instantly fixed. The foundation had been poisoned by their malicious intervention, and sometimes the kindest thing to do is acknowledge the irreparable damage. We agreed to be friends, a painful, necessary compromise that felt more honest than the toxic facade my family had built. My focus shifted to professional resurrection. Sarah, my attorney, leveraged the signed restitution agreement. She sent a cease and desist to Bryn for using my copyrighted architectural renderings and custom event designs. Crucially, she also disseminated the mandated apology letter to my network of clients, accompanied by a polite professional note from me explaining that my hospitalization was due to severe food poisoning, and that the subsequent breakdown rumors were unfortunately the result of a misguided family attempt to manage my affairs. The letter, which subtly pointed to the Mitchells' lies without directly inviting public scorn, was highly effective. My integrity was restored, and my business began crawling back from the abyss. The real sweet revenge, though, came via Dustin, the videographer. He had felt so morally compromised by the situation that he had digitized all his raw footage from the venue setup day. Not just the audio, but the full visual and audio evidence of Mom and Bryn bragging about their heist. He was legally obliged to provide the footage to the client, which, due to the contract transfer, was temporarily Bryn. But his conscience was clear. He sent me a digital copy first. "You should have this, Quinn. Use it how you need to. It's too important to disappear." I watched the footage late one night. It was nauseating. Bryn, sipping champagne in the stolen venue, laughing about how her rustic sister had aimed too small. Mom on the phone with one of her high-net-worth real estate clients, casually mentioning Bryn's amazing launch and how it would elevate the Mitchell family's profile. They were treating my entire life and $120,000 as collateral for a PR campaign. I realized the financial restitution, while crucial, was only the first step. They had planned to profit immensely from my ruin, both socially and professionally. I had to ensure their crime didn't become my silence. I consulted Sarah about options for using the evidence for maximum deterrent effect without violating the non-disparagement clause that was subtly woven into the restitution agreement. Her advice was genius. I couldn't publicly slander them, but I could certainly educate others using my experience. I started a professional blog, initially called The Architect's Recovery, detailing the financial and psychological steps necessary for reclaiming a professional life after unexpected personal catastrophe. I wrote in detail about the importance of non-disparagement clauses, contract loopholes, and, most importantly, the critical importance of digital asset protection and next-of-kin access management. I described this scenario, without naming names, as per the agreement, focusing on the specific methods of identity theft and professional sabotage that occurred during a medical crisis. The blog went viral in my industry, hitting niche architectural and small business forums. The case study was too specific, too detailed to be coincidence. People in the know, especially in the close-knit vendor and high-end real estate communities, immediately connected the dots to the scandal surrounding the Mitchells, the Terracotta Gardens transfer, and the sudden Sterling breakup. The real estate community is a shark tank, and Mom's clients, the old money types who value discretion above all else, started asking pointed questions. Why did Joyce Mitchell's daughter need to steal an architect's designs and entire event setup? Why was her son-in-law's family forced to issue a statement citing lack of integrity? The blog post was a digital scarlet letter. Joyce Mitchell, the high-end broker, began losing major listings. Dad, the retired federal prosecutor, was suddenly facing sharp questions from old colleagues about his family's moral guidance. Bryn, the influencer, lost 3 major brand sponsorships that cited negative association and lack of authenticity. Bryn called me screaming, demanding I take down the libel. I calmly quoted Sarah's legal language. My blog is a factual, educational case study designed to help other professionals protect themselves. It contains no names and is in full compliance with the terms of the restitution agreement. Your reaction, however, speaks volumes. The silence on the other end of the line was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. I was no longer fighting for money or even Liam. I was fighting for the principle of integrity, and I was using their own desperation for status to destroy the very image they had tried to build on my ruin. The real victory was watching their reputation, the asset they cherished above all others, crumble under the weight of their own actions, all without me breaking a single legal term. The feeling of vindication was incredible, but I knew the fight wasn't over. They had repaid the money, but the betrayal was still raw. What I needed next was not revenge, but true, final closure, and I knew exactly where to find it. I had to redefine my own success, outside the shadow of their expectations. The financial restitution was complete. $145,000 hit my account, and the loan was instantly paid off. The monetary recovery was swift, but the emotional scars were deep. I had the money, but I still had the memory of waking up from a coma, only to realize my entire family had conspired to commit grand theft. My revenge had to be permanent, a lasting monument to their betrayal that only they would truly understand. My blog, The Architect's Recovery, exploded. The readership extended beyond the architectural niche, transforming into a resource for anyone navigating family betrayal and identity theft. The intense anonymous specificity of the case study kept the Mitchells in a legal chokehold, while simultaneously destroying their professional standing through inference. Joyce was struggling to maintain her high-tier listings. Dad was facing early retirement obscurity instead of the celebrated status he craved. And Bryn's engagement was gone, her reputation was mud, and her aesthetic content, now stripped of my stolen architectural renderings, looked hollow and frantic. 1 year after I woke up in that hospital bed, a new invitation arrived. It was heavy, cream-colored stock, my cousin Claire's wedding. Claire, who had always been a quiet observer, included a small, handwritten note tucked inside the RSVP card. I know what they did. Your presence would mean the world to me, but I understand if you need the distance. You didn't just rebuild your life, you helped me reclaim mine. Claire's note was the first tangible proof that my revenge wasn't just punitive, it was generative. It had created space for honesty in the toxic Mitchell family atmosphere. I still hesitated. Stepping back into that orbit, even for a neutral event, felt dangerous. I set the invitation aside, refusing to let obligation dictate my choice.
My life was now entirely self-determined. That evening, I hosted a celebration.
It wasn't a sad commemoration of what I lost, but a fierce celebration of what I had built. My friends arrived. Dustin, the videographer who had given me the evidence, Sarah, my attorney, who had turned emotion into leverage, and Liam, the ex-fiancé, who was now a supportive, honest friend. We gathered in my new apartment, a loft space I had secured after the restitution, designed specifically for function and light. Dustin had strung fairy lights around my drafting table, which was covered not with wedding plans, but with mock-ups for new foundations, my new architectural consulting firm specifically for women recovering from financial or professional setbacks. Liam raised his glass. To boundaries that protect and second chances that heal. The irony was that the $120,000 they stole ultimately allowed me to launch this business without debt. Their greed became my seed money. The next morning, I was downtown at a recording studio. I had leveraged the success of the blog into a podcast. Today, on The Stories We Reclaim, we're discussing the moment you realize that forgiveness doesn't mean abandoning boundaries. My own experience taught me that releasing anger is necessary for survival, but giving harmful people renewed access to your life is self-destruction. I looked into the microphone, sharing the hard-won clarity. I had forgiven them, not for them, but for me. The anger no longer defined me. The final, absolute closure came 2 weeks later. I was approached by a major publisher about turning my case study into a full-length book, The Architect's Recovery: Rebuilding Your Life After Betrayal. The contract was lucrative. My book wouldn't just be an anonymous case study, it would be a memoir. And the non-disparagement clause Sarah had so carefully structured was about to meet its ultimate test. The clause prevented me from slandering them or using the restitution agreement for public revenge, but it could not stop me from sharing my personal, factual experience, an experience that just happened to detail the financial and reputational ruin of a high-profile family in Seattle real estate. The first advance copy of the book arrived on my desk. The acknowledgments were simple, thanking Liam, Dustin, Sarah, and Claire for their integrity. There was no mention of the Mitchells. As I placed the book on my shelf, the phone rang. It was Joyce. Her voice was strained, no longer holding that imperious real estate broker charm. "Quinn, we saw the press release about your book. If you publish this, it will ruin your father's legacy. It will finish Bryn's career. You have the money. Can't you just be quiet? Don't you care about family?" "Mom," I said, my voice completely level, "you cared about the Mitchell name so much that you stole my home, my savings, and my engagement while I was unconscious. My book is about integrity. It details the steps necessary to rebuild after a catastrophic loss of trust. It is my truth, and unlike yours, it is factual and documented." The silence this time was truly final. I hung up the phone. I hadn't destroyed them. They had destroyed themselves. I just provided the blueprints for the collapse. I decided to attend Claire's wedding. I wore a simple, beautiful dress, arriving alone, but completely whole. When Bryn, looking pale and miserable, spotted me across the room, she knew. When Mom saw me, she knew. They saw not the victim they left in the hospital, but the architect who had meticulously built a new life from the ashes of their betrayal. I didn't engage. I smiled at Claire, celebrated her genuine happiness, and left feeling nothing but peace. My future was secure, my integrity was intact, and my story, no longer defined by their theft, was now an asset. The ultimate revenge wasn't the money, but the fact that I had turned their worst crime into my greatest success. I walked out of that wedding, knowing I was finally, truly free.